In the affluent neighborhood of San Mateo, California, Emily Harrison lived with her husband Robert. The white mansion built on a hill overlooking the Pacific Ocean had been purchased with the fortune that Emily's grandfather had built through his oil business. Emily had spent most of her time alone in this house since childhood, just as she always had. Emily's family, the Winslows, were known as one of California's wealthiest families. The oil-related business that her grandfather Edward Winslow had built from scratch had been expanded by her father Frank, the third generation, into real estate investment and financial services. Emily was born as an only daughter, and from childhood, it was predetermined that she would inherit the family's enormous fortune. However, the conditions for inheritance set by her father were strict. Maintaining the marriage and protecting the family's honor were absolute requirements. 4 years ago, Emily married Robert Harrison, who ran an investment company. Robert was an ambitious businessman who charmed many people with his handsome features and sophisticated speaking skills. In the early days of their marriage, Emily was attracted to his passion and intelligence. Robert, in turn, showed strong interest in Emily's beauty and, above all, the enormous wealth that her family possessed. A year after their marriage, Matthew was born to them. He was a beautiful boy with golden hair and blue eyes. For Emily, Matthew was the first person in her life whom she could love wholeheartedly. Having sensed from childhood that the adults around her were interested in her wealth, Emily found deep comfort in Matthew's pure affection. The 6 years after her son was born were the happiest period of Emily's life. Robert also seemed to dote on Matthew. On weekends, the family would go out on their yacht and enjoy the blue waters of the Pacific. Matthew loved the water and wanted to hold the yacht's steering wheel with his small hands. Robert would stroke his son's head and promise that in the future, they would travel the world together on a big yacht. However, everything changed 2 years ago in the summer. On the day when the family of 3 went out on the yacht, they were caught in a sudden storm. According to Robert's explanation, Matthew fell from the deck into the sea and was swept away by the violent waves. The search team looked for his small body in the ocean for days, but it was never found. The police processed it as an accident, and Matthew was declared dead after being reported missing. From that day on, Robert never shed a single tear. He calmly proceeded with the funeral preparations and showed no change in expression even in front of the altar decorated with Matthew's small photograph. While Emily collapsed in tears in the middle of the night, Robert quietly checked his work emails beside her. "Stop clinging to a dead child." When Emily was crying while hugging her son's clothes in Matthew's room, Robert said this in a cold voice. "People must move forward. Matthew is gone. It's not good for you to remain trapped in the past forever." Emily was shocked by her husband's words. Only a few weeks had passed since the accident. Could the sadness of losing a son she had spent every day with for 6 years disappear so easily? Robert returned to his usual work the month after the accident and began traveling more frequently than before. His business trips to Florida and New York increased, and the time he spent at home clearly decreased. Even when Emily complained about her loneliness, Robert explained it was for business expansion. "Why don't you start something new yourself? Charity work or a hobby? Staying home alone will only make you sadder." Robert's suggestion sounded rational, but it didn't resonate with Emily's heart. What she sought wasn't new activities but her husband's warm support. However, for Robert,
"Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious."
Matthew's death seemed to be merely an obstacle to overcome. Emily began visiting Matthew's grave in the quiet cemetery on the hill every day. The small headstone was engraved with "Beloved son Matthew Harrison." Emily brought blue roses, which were her son's favorite, and spoke quietly to the headstone. "Matthew, Mama is here again today. I will never forget you. Never." Even the cemetery caretaker began to worry about Emily's daily visits. However, for Emily, this quiet time was the only precious moment when she could feel connected to her son. 8 months had passed since Matthew's death. Emily's daily visits to the grave had now become the center of her life. She would wake up at 7 in the morning, have a light breakfast, then go to the flower shop to buy blue roses. She would spend the morning in the hilltop cemetery and return home in the early afternoon. This routine was the only thing that gave Emily a sense of being alive. Robert continued to be absorbed in his work as always. He would leave for the company early in the morning and return home late at night. The frequency of his business trips increased even more, and he continued to spend less than half the month at home. Even when Emily prepared dinner waiting for her husband's return, she would receive a message saying, "Please eat first," most of the time. "I'll be late tonight. There's an important meeting for the Florida project." Robert's text messages were always brief and cold. Emily would sit alone at the dining table and eat quietly. This time, which used to be spent joyfully with the family of 3, had now become the most painful moment of all. One night, Emily gathered courage and spoke to Robert. "Lately, I hardly have any opportunity to talk with you. Couldn't we discuss Matthew a little more?" Robert answered without looking up from his documents. "There's nothing to discuss about Matthew. He's dead. That's the reality. But we're a couple who lost our son together. Don't we need each other's support?" At that moment, Robert finally looked up. Clear irritation was visible in his eyes. "Emily, enough already. You go to the cemetery every day, clinging to a dead child. What do you think that will change? Matthew won't come back. Accept reality." Emily felt her chest tighten at her husband's cold words. "Matthew is our son. He's a precious child we spent every day with for 6 years. Even if you tell me to forget, a mother can't do such a thing. I'm not telling you to forget. But stop clinging to a dead child. Your behavior is unhealthy. You should consider receiving counseling." Robert's words left deep wounds in Emily's heart. She hadn't realized how painful it would be to have her love for her son called unhealthy. From that night on, the rift between the couple deepened further. Robert shortened his time at home even more than before and began avoiding conversations with Emily. Meanwhile, Emily gave up on having her husband understand her feelings and clung even more to Matthew's memories. To dispel her loneliness, Emily decided to start using social media. She created an Instagram account called "With Love for Matthew" and began posting photos of her cemetery visits and memories with her son. "I came to see Matthew again today. Blue roses were your favorite color, weren't they? I think about you every day." Along with a photo of blue roses placed in front of the headstone, Emily wrote a message of love to her son. The posts gradually gained followers, and warm comments came from other mothers who had similarly lost children. For the first time, Emily felt she had met people who understood her feelings. "Matthew, today I brought the picture you drew in kindergarten. It's the dinosaur picture you loved so much. Do you remember? My son, today was your birthday. You would have turned 7. Mama wanted to make a cake and celebrate with you." Emily's posts gradually began attracting attention. A local newspaper even requested an interview. However, this activity would provoke Robert's anger. "Emily, what are you doing?" One night, Robert was furious, holding Emily's smartphone in his hand. "Posting private family matters on social media is outrageous. Stop it immediately. I'm only posting about my son. What's wrong with that? Have you ever thought about our family's reputation? This could cause trouble for your father's company too. Continuing to talk about a dead child in public is abnormal." Robert's words had a coldness that Emily had never felt before. "Matthew isn't a dead child. He's our beloved son. It's the same thing. Enough already. What you need is to see a doctor. I'll make an appointment with a psychiatrist tomorrow." Emily was appalled by her husband's words. Why should continuing to love her son be treated as a mental illness? Have you ever shed a tear for Matthew? Have you ever missed our son even once? Robert answered coldly. Being emotional and dealing with things realistically are different. I'm a realist. I'm different from people who can't move forward because they're trapped in the past. That night, Emily shut herself in the bedroom alone. Her husband didn't come to her. He had taken to sleeping on the study sofa more often. The next morning, Robert began packing early. Another business trip. I'll be away for about 2 weeks for projects in New York and Florida. You should take time to think quietly by yourself. 2 weeks. There are several important contracts. Without income, we can't maintain this house either. Robert explained matter-of-factly, but Emily felt as if her husband was running away from her. Don't we need to talk about our marriage? Work is the priority right now. We'll think about it when I get back. Robert said this and left the house with a large suitcase. Emily saw her husband's car drive away from the entrance. Lately, Robert seemed like a completely different person. The warmth from the early days of their marriage had been completely lost, and he no longer even treated Emily as a human being. Alone, Emily cried out loud for the first time in a while. The sadness of losing her son, the loneliness of not being understood by her husband, and the despair about her situation all overwhelmed her at once. Matthew, what should Mama do? Papa says to forget about you. But Mama can't do that. You're alive in my heart. That day too, Emily went to the cemetery. In front of her son's headstone, she spoke quietly as always. A week had passed since Robert left for his business trip to Florida. Emily continued to visit the cemetery every day as before. The cemetery, wrapped in mourning silence, was the only place where she could find peace of mind. She rarely encountered other visitors, and the only sound was Mr. Johnson, the caretaker, mowing the lawn in the distance. That day was mid-October, a calm afternoon typical of California autumn. Emily sat down in front of Matthew's small headstone as usual, carrying a bouquet of blue roses. The headstone was made of white marble and beautifully engraved with her son's name in simple yet elegant lettering. Emily rearranged the flowers in the vase and carefully wiped the headstone clean. Matthew, Mama came again today. Emily began speaking to her son in a small voice. This time was the most precious moment for her. Today, I made chocolate chip cookies that you loved. Do you remember? On Saturday afternoons, we made them together in the kitchen. You were so good at kneading the dough with your little hands. Emily took cookies from a small bag she had brought and placed them in front of the headstone. Papa went on another business trip. Lately, he's really been home so little. But Mama will never forget about you. Every day, I think about you. The wind from the Pacific gently swayed Emily's hair. Old oak trees stood around the cemetery, and the afternoon sunlight streaming through them warmly illuminated the headstone. Emily quietly shed tears while tracing memories of when her son was still small. I remember when you were born as if it were yesterday. You were so small, but such a beautiful baby. When you first said Mama, how happy Mama was. Emily placed her hand on the headstone and gently stroked it as if she were petting her son's head. When you started walking, your first step was toward Mama. Watching you laugh and get back up no matter how many times you fell, Mama was amazed by your strength. The wind grew a little stronger, and the surrounding trees rustled. Emily put the blanket she had brought over her knees and continued her conversation with her son. At the kindergarten recital, you played the role of a little prince. You looked like you were about to cry from nervousness, but when you found Mama's face, you smiled. Your smile at that moment is still shining in Mama's heart. Emily took out a photo of her son and propped it against the headstone. It was taken on his 6th birthday, showing Matthew standing in front of a cake with a big smile. You were such a kind child. You treasured small animals and flowers, and whenever someone was in trouble, you always tried to help them. Mama is proud of you. Forgetting the passage of time, Emily continued expressing her feelings to her son. The sun began to set in the west, and evening silence visited the cemetery. No other visitors were visible, and Mr. Johnson the caretaker seemed to have gone home too. "I love you, Matthew. Mama will never forget you. No matter what happens, you continue to live in Mama's heart." Emily pressed her forehead against the headstone and offered a deep prayer. She wished for her son to be at peace and for them to meet again someday. It was then. "Mama." A small, trembling voice came from behind her. Emily's heart began beating violently. It was unmistakably her beloved son's voice. But such a thing was impossible. Matthew had died 2 years ago. Emily tried to convince herself it was a hallucination. "Mama." Again, the same voice was heard. This time more clearly than before. Emily's whole body began to tremble. Slowly, fearfully, she turned around. Standing there was definitely Matthew. However, it wasn't the 6-year-old son she remembered. Before her eyes stood an 8-year-old boy who had grown during the 2 years. His height had clearly increased, and his features had become a little more mature. But that golden hair and blue eyes, and that gentle smile, were unmistakably Matthew's. "Matthew?" Emily's voice was trembling. Was this a dream or reality? Her son nodded slightly while shedding tears. "Mama, it's me. It's Matthew." Emily tried to stand up, but her legs had no strength. Her son ran to her first and jumped into Emily's arms. At that moment, Emily felt her son's warmth. This wasn't a hallucination. Her son was definitely there. "Matthew, Matthew, is it really you?" Emily gazed at her son's face with disbelief while holding him tight. "Mama, I wanted to see you for so long." "But Papa." Matthew began speaking in broken sentences while crying. "Papa took me away. And he said you had died." Emily's world changed in an instant. Her son was alive. For 2 years, while she had been visiting the grave every day, her son had been alive. "Mama isn't dead. Mama has been here all along." Emily stroked her son's head while trying to understand the situation with her confused mind. "Where is Papa? Where have you been?" "I was in Florida. With a woman named Lisa. But I was called Jacob. I was told I mustn't say my real name." Anger and confusion swirled in Emily's heart. Had Robert taken their son away and been deceiving her? "But how did you get here?" "I escaped when Lisa went out. I wanted to see Mama for so long, so long." Matthew continued crying with his face buried in his mother's chest. "Mama, I don't want to be alone anymore. I want to be with Mama." Emily held her son tightly. As if to fill the 2-year gap, she felt her son's grown body. Something unbelievable was happening, but it was undeniably real. "It's okay, Matthew. Everything's okay now. Mama is here." In the cemetery bathed in golden sunset light, mother and son quietly embraced each other. Emily brought her son home. Matthew wouldn't let go of his mother's hand, as if to fill the 2 years of separation. Sitting on the living room sofa, Emily continued listening to her son's story. "Mama, I was really confused." Matthew was cuddling on his mother's lap like a small child. Though her 8-year-old son had grown bigger than before, to Emily he was always her beloved child. "I remember that day when I went on the yacht with Papa. Suddenly, Papa picked me up and put me in a small boat. There was no storm. The sea was calm." Anger rose in Emily's heart. The accident story that Robert had explained to the police was all lies. Then we arrived at a different port. Papa said, "A new life is starting now." And he said, "Mama got sick and died." Sick and died. Papa said, "Mama loved you, but she got a very sad illness and died. So from now on, You'll live with Papa and a new family." Emily held her son while beginning to understand the full scope of her husband's terrible plan. "What kind of life did you have in Florida?" "There was a woman named Lisa. Papa told me to call her new mama, but I didn't want to. Lisa was kind, but she wasn't my real mama." Matthew continued while wiping his tears. "My name was changed to Jacob too. I was told many times that I mustn't say my real name. If I told anyone my real name, they threatened that Mama's grave would be destroyed." Emily's chest tightened. Had he made such terrible threats to a 6-year-old child? "What about school?" "I went to a local elementary school. But all the documents said Jacob Smith. Papa kept telling me, forget your past. Start a new life." "What kind of person was this woman Lisa?" "She was a nurse. It seemed like Papa had known her for a long time. She was kind to me, but she seemed somehow sad." Emily listened to her son's story while thinking about Robert's motives. Why had it been necessary to take their son away? And why had he lied to her that Matthew was dead? "Mama, I wanted to see you all along. I cried alone at night. I missed my real mama. How were you able to come here all by yourself?" When Papa came back to Florida, Lisa drove him to the airport. But when Lisa went shopping, I left the house. I took a bus with money I had hidden, and then got on a plane. An 8-year-old child alone. Papa always taught me how to buy tickets when we traveled. I'm smart, so I remembered. While impressed by Matthew's cleverness, Emily's heart ached that her son had to make such a dangerous journey alone. "But how did you know I would be at this cemetery?" "I looked you up on Lisa's computer. I saw on Instagram that you came to the cemetery every day. I knew you brought flowers for me too." Emily was startled. Her social media posts had been a clue for her son. Perhaps Robert's demand to stop using social media had other reasons. The next day, after hiding her son in a safe place, Emily began investigating Robert's actions. First, she checked his company's financial records. Since Robert had left the household financial management to Emily, she had access to the company accounts. Upon investigation, she found that business trip expenses to Florida over the past 2 years had been abnormally high. Moreover, many of these were processed as personal expenses. Furthermore, she discovered mortgage payments for a residence near Miami. Robert had purchased a house in Florida. Emily hired a private investigator and requested a more detailed investigation. 3 days later, she received a shocking report from Detective Mr. Kane. "Mrs. Harrison, your husband has been in a relationship with a woman named Lisa Johnson for the past 3 years. He even has an official marriage certificate with her. It's bigamy." "Bigamy?" "Yes. According to Florida state records, Robert Harrison and Lisa Johnson were married a year and a half ago. Your son is legally registered as their adopted child." All the mysteries were being solved in Emily's mind. Furthermore, upon investigation, your husband has been accessing your son's trust fund. Most of the $500,000 in educational funds set up in Matthew's name has already been withdrawn. "Trust fund?" "Yes. The fund your father set up for Matthew. Normally it can't be touched until age 18, but a death certificate changes that." Emily was stunned. She hadn't known about the existence of the fund her father had set up for his grandson. "That's not all. The $1 million life insurance payout for your son has already been received. Robert Harrison was listed as the beneficiary." "Life insurance? When was that done?" "It appears to have been taken out shortly after your marriage. Your signature is there too, but handwriting analysis might be necessary." Emily tried to remember documents she didn't recall signing. In the early days of their marriage, Robert had asked her to sign many legal documents. Life insurance papers might have been included among them. "There's an even more serious discovery," the detective continued. There's evidence that Robert Harrison was also investigating your inheritance. Detailed research materials about the Winslow family fortune were found in his office. My inheritance? Yes. There are records of him consulting with multiple lawyers about inheritance in case of your divorce or death. With your son's death, you would be the next heir. And if something happened to you, he as your spouse would inherit everything. Emily was horrified. Robert's plan wasn't just about their son's trust fund or insurance money, but aimed at her family's entire fortune. And probably ultimately, her own life might be in danger too. Mrs. Harrison, I recommend contacting the police immediately. This isn't simply a kidnapping case. It's an organized fraud case. Emily took out her cell phone with trembling hands. Finally, the entire truth had been revealed. The man she had thought was her loving husband was actually a cold-blooded criminal. He had taken their son away, deceived her, and targeted the family fortune. However, the most important thing was that Matthew was alive. Her son had returned. And this time, no one would take him away. Emily immediately contacted the police. FBI agent Davis took charge of the case, and Matthew's DNA testing was conducted. The results were clear. The 8-year-old boy before them was definitely Matthew Harrison himself. Mrs. Harrison, this is an interstate kidnapping case and simultaneously a large-scale financial fraud case, Agent Davis explained. We will arrest your husband Robert Harrison and Lisa Johnson immediately. 2 days later, Robert was arrested at Miami Airport in Florida. Lisa Johnson was also detained at the same time. When the footage of Robert being handcuffed was broadcast on the news, Emily watched it with her son. Mama, won't Papa come back anymore? Matthew looked up at his mother anxiously. For an 8-year-old child, understanding the complexity of the adult world was difficult. Papa did bad things, so he'll be in a special place for a while. But you're safe now. Mama will always be with you. Emily gently explained while holding her son. The trial was held 6 months later. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Robert's bank records, evidence of bigamy in Florida, illegal withdrawals from their son's trust fund, and receipt of fraudulently obtained life insurance money. Furthermore, Lisa Johnson was also prosecuted as an accomplice. When Emily faced Robert again in court, she couldn't find any trace of her former husband in him. There was no color of regret in his eyes, but rather only irritation that his plan had been exposed. You never loved our son at all, did you? Emily stated this quietly from the witness stand. Both Matthew and I were nothing more than tools for you to obtain money. But you didn't understand that love can never be bought with money. The verdict was as harsh as expected. Robert Harrison received a 20-year prison sentence for kidnapping, fraud, and bigamy. Lisa Johnson received a 5-year sentence as an accomplice. Emily immediately began divorce proceedings. With the help of an excellent legal team, she was able to protect all her assets. The illegally withdrawn funds from her son's trust fund were fully recovered, and she received formal apologies and compensation from the life insurance company. Mama, what are we going to do from now on? Matthew asked his mother in the living room of their new home. Emily had purchased a smaller but warmer house near her father's company. We're going to start a new life, Matthew. This time as a real family. Emily smiled while taking her son's hand. Let's find things you like and do what you want to do. Mama is planning to start something new too. Emily had decided to establish a nonprofit organization to support women in similar situations. She wanted to use her experience to help victims of domestic fraud and child kidnapping. Matthew transferred to a local elementary school and gradually returned to normal life while receiving counseling. The memories of his 2 years in Florida were complex for him, but surrounded by his mother's love, his emotional wounds gradually healed. One evening, mother and son visited the Hilltop Cemetery together. Matthew's small headstone had already been removed. In its place, a small memorial bench had been placed. Mama, you thought about me here all this time, didn't you? Yes. Every day, I continued loving you. I thought about Mama all the time when I was in Florida too. I could never forget my real Mama's love. The two sat on the bench and watched the Pacific sunset. Matthew, Mama learned one important thing, Emily said, placing her hand on her son's shoulder. A real family isn't made only of blood relations. It's bound together by hearts that continue loving each other no matter what difficulties arise, no matter how far apart we are. Matthew looked up at his mother and smiled. I think so too. We're a real family, aren't we? Yes. And we'll always be together from now on. As the sun set into the ocean, mother and son walked home hand in hand. The long nightmare was over, and real life was about to begin. The strength of a mother who had risen from the sadness of losing her loved one, discovered the truth, and achieved justice became a new light of hope illuminating their future.